important to get everybody in and seated. So, members of the public, you're all very welcome. And in particular, obviously, I'd like to welcome members of the Extinction Rebellion, Sutton, and I believe there's a couple of the Croydon team here as well, so I know you are welcome. Just to say, obviously, as chair of the partnership, I'd like to make the following points in support of your cause. Obviously, in terms of waste reduction, waste reuse, etc., and the channels in which we dispose of our waste is a challenge for us all. But the Extinction Rebellion, and particularly the movement, has done a great deal to shine the spotlight on an incredibly important issue. And I speak on behalf of all the 4 partner boroughs of Croydon, Kingston, Merton and Sutton when I say this. And we welcome your activity, your input and your ideas to the partnership. The 4 boroughs obviously have shared aims in terms of the objectives of reducing waste, which is obviously the key thing in terms of our environment, increasing reuse, increasing our recycling, and obviously managing the non-recyclable waste in the most environmentally sustainable way possible. And I believe these are entirely sort of compatible with the objectives of Extinction Rebellion. And I think at some point I'd like to offer you the opportunity for a group of you to come and sit down with officers of the South London Waste Partnership, share your ideas, and we'll obviously share some of the technical details of how we have to deal with waste, environmental agencies' restrictions upon how we deal with that, and really get together to work out how best we can go forward in the South London Waste Partnership. But at a time when recycling rates are stagnating across the country, I'm really pleased that the South London Waste Partnerships is bucking that trend, and we've seen our recycling rate rise from 39% to 46%. Obviously, just from a Croydon point of view, I'm really pleased we've got ours up to 47 from 34%, so that's a really big increase, and we're now in this partnership way above the English national average. So that's something that the partnership can be proud of. And any household waste that's not sorted for recycling by residents is now sent to the Beddington Energy Recovery Facility, otherwise known as the incinerator, where it's generated at the moment to use electricity, instead of course, the Beddington landfill site, which is now closed. And this is an important step in terms of the waste hierarchy for the non-recyclable waste we collect from households. It would be wrong to suggest that South London Waste Partnership boroughs have not taken notice of the important issues being highlighted by Extinction Rebellion, because we're obviously very aware about issues around carbon footprint and carbon and reducing that. And obviously one of the challenges for us is the difference between the amount of carbon output and methane, etc., that goes into the air through the landfill sites. It's actually less through the energy from recovery. So therein lies a challenge. Whilst neither are particularly popular methods of disposing of things, we have to go to what is probably the best option that we have at this particular moment. And that is not to say that technology may not change in the next decade or so, and we will be moving as a partnership to make sure that any partners that are disposing of our waste take up those new technologies. And it's important that to note the South London Waste Partnership itself is not a legal entity in its own right. It's a voluntary partnership of the 4 boroughs, because obviously by working together in synergy we can do things like having uniform recycling systems which benefit us all, for instance, in terms of increasing the recycling rate and getting the message out to people about recycling. And the role of our partnership, which is where you come in as members of the public and also Extinction Rebellion, is so that we share ideas and resources and the expertise in order to maximise the impact and the benefits for the individuals and our efforts and initiatives. So obviously the key for all of us around the table and all of us as a society is the key thing is reducing the amount of waste we create as human beings. And I think all of us here have got valid arguments and valid points to make about how we get to that stage. So I very much welcome all of the Extinction Rebellion here this evening. When we're doing the reports, if there's anything, I'll take the odd question, and if officers can answer it, they'll obviously do their best to do so. But I will reiterate the offer that at some point we'll meet with the Extinction Rebellion members and actually talk about some of the technicalities around energy from recovery, landfill, the number of journeys, for instance, that are made in terms of collecting waste, taking it to sites, whether it be landfill or incineration. These are all things our officers have got a great deal of knowledge about, can share with you. Equally, you can share ideas that you have, and hopefully we'll work towards our main aim, which of course is all 4 boroughs have declared a climate emergency, so we're on board. Okay, so if I move to the agenda, can I have any apologies and for absence? Okay, there are no apologies for absence. Can I ask, because we've got members of the public here, that we just go around the table and introduce ourselves so members of the public are aware of who we are. So we'll go this way around. I'm Councillor Stuart Collins, I'm Chair this year for the South London Waste Partnership, and I'm Deputy Leader of Croydon Council.
I'm Lawrence, Head of Environment for Croydon Council. John Haynes, Communications Advisor for the Partnership.
Baker, Strategic Partnership Manager for the Partnership.
Mark Wacky, Finance Lead for the Partnership. Stuart King, Cabinet Member, Environment and Transport at Croydon.
Charles Baker, Commissioning and Strategy Manager at Merton.
Councillor Mark Allison, Deputy Leader of Merton.
Stephen Byers, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, Health and the Environment in Merton.
John Bolsey, I'm the Assistant Director of Public Space for the Borough of Merton.
Deborah Flintoff, Interim Assistant Director at Kingston for Contracts and Commercial.
Hilary Gander, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Sustainable Transport in Kingston.
I'm Andrea Keys, I'm the Contract Manager for the South London Waste Partnership.
Councillor Emmanuel Avalon, Chair of the Environment and Neighbourhood Committee in Sutton.
Matt Clubb, Assistant Director of Environment and Community Safety in Sutton.
Councillor Ben Andrew, Vice Chair of Environment and Neighbourhoods Committee in Sutton.
Victoria Lower, Senior Democratic Services and Governance Officer at Croydon.
Okay, thanks, Brennan. I haven't got any urgent business declared. Are there any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated, pages 5 to 12. Can I have agreement for those minutes? Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item 6, the contract A and B, contract management report. Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the contract management report for the period 1st of April 2019 to the 30th of November 2019. The report provides a performance summary for the SLWP waste receipt and transfer services, the HRRC services, residual waste treatment, and the green and food waste composting services. A couple of points I'd like to highlight from the report. In section 2.5, we highlight the results of the HRRC customer satisfaction surveys. The surveys continue to show satisfaction levels above 80%, suggesting our residents are generally satisfied with the service. Another point to note, whilst the recycling markets have been challenging, we are pleased to report there has been a 1% improvement in recycling at the HRRCs when compared to the same period last year, and this is highlighted in 2.8 of the report in more detail. SLWP continue to work with Veolia, the HRRC operator, on a number of improvement measures and trials aimed at finding new ways to increase recycling. And we've detailed these improvement measures in section 2.12 of the report. 2.15 summarises the commercial waste clampdown activities that we're doing at the HRRC site as well. The rollout of this improvement measure corresponds with a drop in wood, rubble and residual waste at our HRRC sites. The drop in residual waste has saved boroughs over £40,000 in disposal costs year to date, and we estimate that we're going to save approximately £50,000 in rubble haulage costs as well as a result of those measures. Contract 3 is in part 3 of the report, and that is our green and food waste composting contract. You can find a summary of the tonnes in Appendix A, Part 4, and that contract is operating well with no issues to report. And finally, Section 4 of the report covers our 2012 residual waste treatment contract with Viridor South London. During the period being reported, we delivered just over 135,000 tonnes. 93% of this waste was treated in the ERF. And a final point to note, across the boroughs there has been a 5% reduction in residual waste for this reporting period when compared to the same period last year. And that gives boroughs a combined saving year to date in excess of 700,000. So the recommendation is to note the contents of the report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Andrew? Okay, I've just got one, Andrew. Obviously, one of the things we're championing is reuse facilities at some of our household recycling centres. We've got a reuse one at Kempton, isn't it? Have we got any plans or any ideas for any of the other centres to get some of these reuse shops up? There's a really good facility in Crystal Palace called the Library of Things, which I think is absolutely brilliant, where people go and hire stuff. It's the sort of thing we should be doing. Have we got any plans for any more? Or are you able to say at this stage?
We've been in discussions with the contractor about expanding our current reuse offering as part of the contract, and we're looking at other sites, where the space is available. So yes, we're looking at expanding on our reuse offer. We currently have a shop at the Sutton facility, which takes reuse items from all the HRRC shops, HRRC sites, reconditions, repairs, and then sells them back to the public. So yes, we are looking at expanding that service.
Yeah, that's really good. And obviously, I think that's something that John, via our publications, we need to get that out and let the public know. Because obviously they can save money as well, and we can obviously make sure, particularly the electrical goods, that rather than be chucked away, they can actually be reused, which I think is really important, at a lot cheaper cost than buying brand new. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, moving on to item. Oh, sorry, ma'am.
Just up to 215, I think it is, the commercial cover. We had a pilot scheme in Sutton about commercial waste Kempton, which was very successful. I think we made it permanent in Sutton. I was just wondering if that was going to be rolled out across the other sites in the partnership, if that's the thinking.
Okay, yeah. So what we've done is we've rolled out bespoke schemes in each of the boroughs. For Kempton and also Kingston, we rolled out a similar policy, and we've developed something slightly different and more bespoke for the Croydon sites, and we're also looking at the Merton sites to roll out something a little bit more bespoke. So it really does need to reflect the customers that we've got in each of the sites and the challenges that we have in each of the sites, which tend to be different in each of the boroughs. So yes, they're rolled out across all sites, but they're slightly different schemes. So yeah.
Just a further point on a different topic, 4.5, on minor exceedances of the ERF. Am I right, John? I think this one's maybe for John, that the ERF takes samples every 10 seconds of what comes out of the ERF. Maybe if you could say a bit more, not great, but a bit more about how that works, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So samples are taken every 10 seconds in each of the two flue stacks, and that's fed back to the control room, so that the people in the control room can immediately take action if any is required. And then on a reporting basis, they work it out on the averages. Some of it is 10-minute averages, some of it is 30-minute averages, and then there's a daily average that they report back to the Environment Agency based on those 10-second readings.
Am I right to say that for when we talk about exceedances, normally it's a matter of seconds. When there's a spike, it's a matter of a couple of seconds, not more than that. For that to be to be bad for the environment, it would have to be that spike for hours.
So I think we're referring particularly to carbon monoxide, and that is the case. So you can get spikes in carbon monoxide because of the content of the waste that's going in, and you might have incomplete combustion for a very short period of time. So obviously that would get picked up by the samples, fed back to the control room, they introduce more oxygen into the process, and that very, very quickly brings those carbon monoxide levels back down. So yes, typically those carbon monoxide exceedances that we've seen on occasion in the past, that they're often only a few seconds in length. And the Environment Agency did respond and urge Councillor Collins wrote to the Environment Agency at the back end of last year, seeking reassurances around the carbon monoxide exceedances that we were seeing at the site. And they wrote back to us and explained that, you know, in their professional view and their opinion, you would, don't quote me on this, I'm trying to remember the exact wording, but you would need a very high level for a prolonged period of time for it to become a serious concern for them from an environmental perspective. And I'll come on to it in my report actually, but to reflect that changing advice, they've actually made a permanent variation that took effect in January, which now brings the Bennington ERF into line with most of the other facilities in the country in terms of the way those carbon monoxide emissions are monitored. But I was going to pick that up in my comment report anyway, so I'll come back.
Okay, so I've got one more question, and then Andy's got a statement to make regarding the fire at Veruloe site.
I just wanted to ask on 215 again, whether there's any evidence that the reduction in tonnage there has coincided with any increase in fires putting elsewhere, if the rubbish is actually not ending up there but being deposited in the streets.
As far as I know, there's been no correlation between the commercial waste clampdown that we've been doing at the HRRC sites and the might have been in any of the boroughs, so that hasn't been raised as an issue with me.
Yeah, just on that point, that was one of the concerns we raised when we initially looked at the pilot scheme, and feedback a year later is that we haven't seen an increase in the flights.
Okay, Annie's got a report regarding the talks that we had with Veruloe.
I've just got a statement for them. So the South London Waste Partnership officers and Councillor Collins as chair of this committee met with Veruloe on the 20th of January 2020 to receive an update on where we are with the investigation report into the fire that occurred at the Bennington Waste Transfer Station in July 2019. Veruloe has conducted a thorough investigation into what happened and presented a draft of their internal incident report to us. This was reassuringly thorough. We were particularly pleased to see that Veruloe recognised this was a significant incident and that they have implemented a number of changes to procedures on sites in order to mitigate the risk of a similar event happening in the future. This includes
Sorry, can you speak more slowly?
Sorry.
I'll keep up.
Thank you. This includes improved management, including thermal imaging of any residual bulky waste being stored in the new waste transfer station. Unfortunately, Veruloe are not yet in a position to finalise and formally share their incident reports with the SLWP, as they're still awaiting input from the London Fire Brigade and the Environment Agency. Both agencies have provided interim reports. In the case of the London Fire Brigade, this is a confirmation of attendance report, and in the case of the Environment Agency, a compliance assessment report. But both the London Fire Brigade and the Environment Agency have confirmed to Veruloe that further submissions will be made. We are satisfied that Veruloe have cooperated fully with all relevant agencies and that any delays, whilst frustrating, can't be attributed to them. I anticipate that by the time the committee next meets, both the Fire Brigade and the Environment Agency will have made their final submissions in relation to this matter, and that Veruloe will have been able to finalise and formally share their report with us.
Okay, yeah. As chair, I'll be working with the officers to chase both the fire service up and also the Environmental Agency, making it clear that our commitment is that as soon as all reports are available and the whole process has been completed, we'll have a particular item on the agenda of a future South London Waste Partnership, and at that meeting I'll also allow public questions. So one of the things that we said right at the outset, and I made clear and the partnership made clear, is that all facts regarding emissions, all facts regarding anything that happens at that particular site must be publicly accountable, must be produced online. So we'll obviously do that. And with regard to the information about that you're going to come on to later about emissions, I think that explanation should be online as well in simple English, so that you can explain that to people rather than perhaps the language the Environmental Agency uses as well. But at all times we should be accountable as a public body. Okay, so any other questions? I'll take a couple of public questions, and I know Jim's kindly contacted me to let me know he's got a question, so Jim.
Okay.
If you want to come forward and just use the microphone if you want, or if you...
Can you hear me if I just stand up?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I was interested to hear just now, and when we were having coffee, that you've received 2 reports from both the Environment Agency and from the London Fire Brigade, but I've already been told by London Fire Brigade that they have completed 2 reports and that they're available. Unfortunately, the first report would cost me £100 to obtain. That was the attendance report in the first instance. It would be lovely if you could pass that on to our group, the air quality group. The second report, they said, is internal to London Fire Brigade and Viridor, which makes me a bit suspicious. I mean, it'd be great if you can pass that on as well, but it's unfortunate that that information should be contained. It'd be great also to have the Viridor report, especially if it's as thorough as you both describe it as being, because we'd like to know, the South West London Air Quality Monitoring Group, exactly how much air pollution was caused by that particular incident. 9 hours with 4 fire engines, 25 firefighters, with plumes covering much of South, well, visible certainly from most of South London. The Environment Agency have also written 2 reports, or they've cleared 2 reports. And when I spoke to them last week, they said that the first report is obtainable, and they've sent me a copy of that, which I sent to you, which is what we just described now a moment ago. The second report has been held up since November, although it's been cleared by management in the Environment Agency. It's still not available, and the person I spoke to said that one reason for that, and the first reason that he gave, was that it may have been objected to by the operators. Now, I think it would be interesting for Viridor to find out, if you don't know, sorry, for the Waste Partnership to find out whether, if you haven't done already, whether Viridor have actually made a challenge to the second report, the Compliance Assessment Report, which should be in the public domain 6 months after the fire happened.
Yeah, we certainly share your frustration, particularly with the fire service final report not being completed, but that's very interesting to hear, Jim. So all we can do is investigate that, and afterwards Annie will take details down of where you got that information from, and we can certainly deal with that. Annie, would you like to comment on that? Any further comment?
Only to say that we're aware of 1 report from each of those agencies, and as far as we're awaiting, we've seen correspondence saying that we are awaiting the second reports in both cases, and that Viridor aren't objecting to the Environment Agency report.
They haven't objected to the report, to the second report?
No.
Categorically?
We have asked.
You have asked? Oh, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else like to ask a question on that? Yes.
Peter Underwood.
Sorry, Peter.
It was a comment you made in your opening statement, Stuart, where you were saying about the fact in terms of advances in technology and improvement in management of waste. Based on that, can you confirm that there is capacity to vary or cancel the contract if there are better technologies available for dealing with waste instead of burning it?
Annie, are you the right person to ask about the contract details? Because we've had, obviously we discussed these sort of things in workshops as well, which we discussed earlier today, and we thought one of the ideas we could do is invite members of the public to some of our pre-meeting workshops as well, because we want to share ideas, hear about different technologies, and one of the points that came up was what flexibility we've got in the contract. So Annie, if you could clarify that, if a new technology came on board, where do we stand?
We'd certainly be expecting to explore that with providers, and the contractors have changing law provisions as well to make sure that we can keep up with changing requirements.
So that's a yes?
Yes, that's a yes. Okay, so I'm going to move now on to paper. So can I have agreement to paper 6 rather from the committee? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 7, and that's the financial South London Waste Partnership budget update. So that is Michael.
Good evening. Yes, this paper provides an update on the partnership's budget position at month 9, which is December of this financial year, and projected outturn for 2019-20. The projected outturn position for the year at month 9 is an underspend of £25,000, which is £6,250 per borough, and this is a result of 2 variances which are detailed in paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4, and recommendations to note the content of the report.
Okay, thanks. As always, there, Michael report. Anybody got any questions directly to Michael about the report? Okay, well done again, Michael. Okay, and we agree agenda item 7.
Agreed.
Thanks very much. So item agenda 8, and Michael again. And
So this is the report setting out the final budget recommended for 2020-2021. So this report sets out the proposed budget for 2020-2021 covering advice, staffing, communications, data management and project work as agreed at the September 2019 committee as a draft budget, and we're seeking agreement on this final budget at this committee. So the recommendation is for this final budget as presented at the September meeting as draft to be recommended as set out in paragraph 2 and 3.
okay, have got any questions to Andy on that particular part of the report? Okay, so can we agree agenda item 8? Agreed. Okay, can we move then on to agenda item 9 and our communications and engagement, which is a really important part of the South London Waste Partnership. And can I start by thanking John for the series of videos that have gone around all the councils regarding the journey of recycling from residents' doorsteps to actually the product that it becomes at the end, because there had been some controversy, not for the South London Waste Partnership, but across the country about where recycling actually goes to. So it was really good that we confirmed that all our recycling goes to specific sorting centres and it does become actually positive products. And obviously that is massively important for the environment, and obviously helps to make sure that although recycling is not the most important part of the circle, because obviously reducing reuses, but it's important that in that particular area residents are really playing a part, and across the partnership, thank you for that sort of information and the work we've done at schools. It's really good. So communications is vital. So could we have your latest report, John?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I'll be covering that actually in a second, the destination recycling campaign, so that was a good lead-in. So this report covers communications and stakeholder engagement activities relating to phase A and B of the partnerships contracts, and it also focuses on activity between September of last year and January of this year. So just to kick off, to update you on 3 campaigns that we were running towards the end of last year. As you mentioned, Chair, the destination recycling campaign. So at the last committee meeting we actually watched those videos, and they've been uploaded on the partnership website in July. But as we were speaking, we were just about to, the following week actually, to launch a social media campaign to drive traffic to those videos. That launched on the 23rd of September. To coincide with the start of Recycle Week, National Recycle Week campaign. And there was a series, if you remember, of 15-second trailers that we were using on Instagram, Facebook, and then that was to sort of capture the attention of residents, and then they would click through to the partnership website where they would have more information and they could watch the full version of the film. So I'm pleased to report back now the outcome and the results of that campaign at paragraph 1.3 of the report in front of you. There's a table summarising the outcomes. I won't go through all of them, but suffice to say it was very, very successful. In particular, the number of 15-second views of the trailer, which are called through plays. We got 286,000 of those, far exceeding our target of 45,000. Click-throughs to the campaign page on the website, nearly 11,000 click-throughs, which again far exceeded our target. And 30-second plus views of the main film on the partnership's website was over 1,800. So you can see some really good sort of quality engagement there, and a really good return on investment from that campaign. And as you mentioned, I came to the Croydon Cabinet meeting in October, and also to one of the resident association meetings in Merton to share those videos, and they seem to be well received. So they're still there, they're still relevant. Anything the boroughs can be doing to push those out and get them in front of people, as you say, it's vital that residents are reassured that their recycling efforts are worthwhile, and that we take good care of their recycling and it ends up in the right place. Moving on to the next campaign, which was Recycle Week itself. So you'll remember that we were successful in getting £10,000 of funding from Resource London to run some outdoor advertising campaigns across Recycle Week. There's some photographs in the report of some of the outdoor advertising posters that appeared across the tram network and in Kingston and Croydon town centres. The boroughs also supported the campaign through their own communication channels, and that worked really well. Great support from the borough comms teams. And Veolia ran a whole series of assemblies and visits to schools around the Recycle Week theme. So all in all, again, another very successful campaign, I think. And the final campaign to update you on is the Good Food Waste Fright campaign. This was our pumpkin-themed Halloween food waste campaign, which the main target around that was food waste reduction, using the seasonal pumpkin as a sort of a bit of a hook to think about food waste, because pumpkins are a particularly bad example of a type of food that people buy, carve up to use as a lantern, but then don't think about even using it in any of their cooking. And we were just using that as a route in, really, to talk to residents about food waste in general and give them hints and tips about how they can reduce their food waste. Really successful event again, great support from the boroughs. We got £26,000 of funding from Resource London to run this campaign, so again it didn't cost the boroughs any money, which is even better. We ran 4 pop-up events, one in each borough, and it was supported by a digital advertising campaign. And paragraph 3.4 just summarises some of the outcomes from that. So nearly 2,000 face-to-face engagements. We've got nearly 200 written pledges from residents that they would take actions to reduce their food waste. And there are over 3,000 visits to the campaign webpage. And the leaflet that we handed to people included sort of recipes for pumpkins, and we handed out bits of pumpkin loaf, and it was a really nice, good sort of engagement campaign. So that all went very well. Moving on to phase A, section 5 of the report just feeds back on the customer site user satisfaction surveys that are taking place at the HRRCs. They continue, and the results are continue to be published on the SLWP website. Also, we had a meeting with the HRRC team a couple of weeks ago because we've identified some bag splitting. In the black bags that people are bringing to the sites, there still remains quite a lot of recyclable products, things that you can even recycle from the curbside, like plastic bottles and textiles and metals. So it seems it's odd that people go to the bother of putting it in a black bag and driving it down to the HRRC when they could have just recycled it at the curbside. So there's clearly some education information work to do there. So we're going to be developing a leaflet that the site staff can hand out to people, just raising awareness of that issue and encouraging them to sort out their materials for recycling. And we're also going to be doing an audit of content across the 4 borough websites. There have been quite a lot of changes at the sites. Andrea touched on that earlier. So we're just conscious that we need to make sure that the content across the 4 sites is consistent and relevant and accurate. Moving on to section 6 and the Bedlington landfill side of things. Viridor continues to provide regular community updates on the progress of the restoration project, and there's a bit of information on paragraph 6.3 about what the November and December updates contain. And then moving on to the phase B contract and section 8 around the Bedlington ERF communications and stakeholder engagement. So paragraph 8.1 points out that Viridor continues to upload emissions monitoring reports to the virtual visitor centre to make those publicly accessible. That happens twice per month. I am aware that there was a slight delay in getting some of the data for half of December uploaded to the site, and I believe that was down to a technical problem, and that's now been fixed, so that data is now available. So apologies that there was a slight delay in getting that up there. The latest report, which is for the first half of January, is on the site and was uploaded on time. And it's important to highlight that report because this is where the permit variation that the Environment Agency has brought in comes into effect. And the commentary of that report, that January report, includes quite a detailed information about why that change has been brought in, how it's reflected in the graph. So residents who are downloading that information have got a bit of insight and can understand what it is they're reading. But it basically means that carbon monoxide, from now on, the averages will be taken every 10 minutes, not every 30 minutes. So it's more sort of rigorous monitoring. But as a result of that, the EA has slightly elevated the 10-minute average from 100 to 150 milligrams per metre cubed. daily average permitted level has not changed. That remains at 50 milligrams per metre cube. And the permit also now states that the ERF must form under those new limits 95% of the time in any given day. So you have 144 readings or averages that are taken every day now, which is every 10 minutes. So 95% of those must be under that new limit in order for the facility to be compliant with this permit. So all of that's explained in the commentary that goes along with the January emissions report. The education centre is now up and running, and we are starting to host some visits there. We've got some schools that are interested in coming to visit with their sort of environment committees, etc. So we're getting those visits arranged, and that will include a tour of the facility as well. The next edition of the Bedlington Community Newsletter that goes out to 14,000 households around the area of the facility will be going out hopefully later this month. It's certainly in process at the moment, and the community liaison group meetings continue, and I continue to attend those on behalf of the partnership.
Okay, thanks, John. Any questions to John? Yes, and I'll ask one from you, Jim, and then I've got a question as well. Oh, no one.
I just wondered, looking at the later paper on the perception survey, there were some quite interesting things about people's attitudes to recycling, particularly the 16 to 34-year-old bracket is far less committed to recycling than all the other brackets, which surprised me actually. So I just wondered if there were any plans to do any specific comms focused on that younger generation, which the perception is they are all very committed to it, but the statistics would suggest otherwise.
So I am going to come to that. Actually, it's a separate agenda item. I was going to run through the findings, I think, in a second of the report. And yes, you're absolutely right. That is a key finding which I'll highlight. I can either cover it now or then. Yeah. Okay. I will pick that up. You're all right.
Yeah, just before I bring Manuel in, we've done quite a lot of work at schools in Croydon. So we've spoken to 14,000 students, loads of different schools, over 50 schools, about recycling, and the response was really positive. So, and I do think it's worth all the authorities actually making sure that they spend some time getting officers out to talk to schools, because once you get through to the younger people as well, if they see their adults in the household not recycling things, they're quite keen to actually state it. And whilst we've got things like Extinction Rebellion happening as well, and it's live in the news all the time with the marvellous Greta Thunberg and that, we should be making sure that young people are still engaged with all that. So, I think it's worked out really positively in Croydon, so if we could all pick that up. Possible.
Thank you, Chair. I think the campaigns are really good, and you've been quite successful at getting funding to run these, so thanks for that. And some of the reach is for the money we're spending is astonishing, really. I think almost 1 million views on some of this, which is great. I'm glad to hear the explanation about the uploading the emissions monitoring reports. It's reassuring to know that it was a technical error and hopefully it's a one-off. Have they generally been on time since the start? We can't get that reassurance. And just a final point on the schools. Is there, when we, those that were looking to remember, we had early discussions around what we wanted from the education centre, and one of those points was to get the schools there. Is there a formal process to get them to visit, or is it whenever they request a visit, we can arrange that?
So to answer your first question, this is the first time a report's been significantly delayed going up to the site. I do also think it's worth highlighting that uploading this level of detail on emissions on a twice-monthly basis is pretty unheard of in the industry. It's a far higher degree of transparency and openness than you would typically see. So I do think that's worth pointing out. I do honestly believe it was a technical error or misunderstanding, because Google confirmed it was going up the day before and it didn't. So I think hopefully it will just be a one-off, but I will keep a focus on it going forward to make sure that we're there on time. In relation to how to get a visit to the site, you can actually do that through the Virtual Visitor Centre. If you click on the More Information button, there are details about how you can contact there's an education officer at the site, and they can arrange those visits through that route. But obviously, if you've got any particular groups of stakeholders, that you can come to me as well, and I can help arrange as well.
Okay, Jim, and then the lady at the back.
Yeah.
Jim?
Just on the emissions question, I noticed that over the past 6 months, the emissions at a brand shiny new incinerator, I think in 1 month only, have not been breached. So in that whole period, there have been emission breaches in every month. Also, the reports are coming through a bit slow. So the reports that came through just yesterday were dated 3rd of January. 3rd of January. So that's taken some time. I'd be interested to know what's happening there. Today we heard from Boris Johnson that diesel cars, petrol cars and even hybrids in 15 years' time will not come up for sale. So moving towards a low carbon or zero carbon policy, I'd be interested to know how near or whether people here think that it's achievable, basically, the zero waste policy that is happening in Denmark and Sweden and other countries moving towards that. Europe generally trying to move in that direction. Means shutting down the incinerator, really, in short order.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just in regard to the emissions, we've just obviously heard that, and I think this is something the committee should be quite proud of, is that we do make sure that we're probably one of the only places within the incinerator producing this level of information about emissions, and we are quite stringent. So just on one particular point, we did ask for an apology from Viridor for not getting it right, and I think they have apologised to you for that on that occasion, and they don't think it's going to happen again. But in general, I mean, I think all of us around the table want to work towards zero waste. It's a massive ask, and right at this particular moment, with regard to the ERF and obviously the landfill options, in terms of the amount of emissions and the amount of carbon footprint, the actual ERF is actually far less than if we had thousands of trucks, say that the incinerator wasn't here and the landfill site had gone. It's a lot less than thousands of trucks travelling to another site across the southeast. So one of the issues that we were discussing, because this is important too, is looking at future contractors, making sure that their next round, when they purchase their next fleet of vehicles, and there are thousands of vehicles travelling across the UK, taking waste places, that we are looking at electric options and other options other than diesel fuels and petrol. So I think that's one way we can make a massive step forward if we have the electric vehicles. So we are working on that. The lady at the back.
Can I just follow that?
And sorry, John will come back on both questions.
You need to liaise with the government, don't you, to bring it to zero carbon policy?
Yeah, I'll put John in there. I'm not on that particular an expert on that, but our officers are, they work in the industry. So the lady there, if you could...
Well, I might just follow on from that, just to ask that, you've said that the contract can be varied. So if the borough does manage to find, or the 4 boroughs manage to reduce their waste, will the contract be varied to make sure that we're not actually then bringing in rubbish from even further afield? To meet that, as I understand it, the incinerator needs a certain amount of waste to run efficiently. So if we manage to, we should be giving residents an incentive to reduce the amount of waste, not necessarily to keep producing the same amount. So if that is all going towards a target, what then happens to the incinerator? That's what we don't understand, is that at 2030, if we're achieving zero carbon and we're looking towards zero waste, what happens to the incinerator then? I don't understand how that stays part of a picture beyond that date.
Yeah, no, I think Annie can answer about the flexibility of the contracts, because again, if part of the contracts are that you can get all the vehicles, for instance, to be electric, then there's already be renegotiations going on. So, Annie, could you talk about how flexible the contract is in terms of changes either in technology, or as the lady described, less waste going to the incinerator?
There are a whole range of scenarios where I think we would need to work with contractors and other partners to adapt to changing situations. Certainly, we want there to be as little waste as possible being created in our boroughs, and I think all of the boroughs are absolutely committed to minimising waste. We are doing a lot in South London, and you can see that in the figures. We are producing less waste than we were. Less waste is going to the incinerator. That's something we're really proud of, and yes, we will continue to work towards minimising waste. And I would expect that if our waste reduces really significantly, that's because that's happening UK-wide as well, because it will take measures around how things are produced and packaging and so on that will impact much more widely than just the partnership area.
But that isn't an answer to the question.
No, it didn't answer the question about how does the incinerator operate with less waste?
Surely, if the incinerator is not being filled with rubbish, then actually there's a question of it not running economically. And you've got a contract, and actually the contract is dated way beyond the zero carbon dates that all the boroughs have got. So there's a problem, is there not? It's quite straightforward. What happens to the incinerator? If all the rubbish goes down, the incinerator is therefore not operating.
They bring it from elsewhere, that's what the
And
contract says. So there's no point in recycling here, because you just bring rubbish from elsewhere. We could have zero waste across the 4 boroughs, and you bring it from somewhere else for 25 years.
Annie, did you want to answer that question?
It's a sort of hypothetical scenario where we're producing zero waste, but there's still waste to come in. I think I'd be really happy to meet to explore the various elements of this, but you know, the contract has flexibility. We would expect to reduce our waste. That's what we want to do, I think.
But would the incinerator stop operating because you wouldn't be having enough
As
waste?
you said, it is hypothetical, so
I mean, we're all
planning for that.
So right, the office has explained that there is flexibility within the contract, and then we would.
Is there flexibility within the incinerator to operate?
Our aim is obviously and obviously the aim of every borough of the country is to reduce the amount of waste we're creating.
To zero.
So, still haven't answered the question.
Yeah, just a quick point. I think John mentioned that in our premium that one of the worries when the ERF was launched was that it was going to affect our recycling rates, and I don't think that's been the case. In fact, it's been the opposite. I think, and a point I think made from the audience. I think most of there's about 400 ERFs across Europe, and a lot of them are actually in Scandinavian countries, who are surprisingly the ones that have the highest recycling rates and that are sort of pioneering in this sector. So I think there's a bit of a myth that if you are incinerating, you are not going, you're not going to reach the zero carbon as quickly as you think. So I don't think
it's not true.
Sorry, can somebody just ask me one answer for one question?
On the recycling aspect and the fact that the ERF is operating.
Please, can you just tell me how the incinerator would operate if it didn't have enough waste to burn?
Yeah, if we were all efficient and did everything.
You know, we all reached our targets, or we're heading that way. I mean, this affects us all. We all breathe the
South
same
London
air.
Waste Partnership would have to renegotiate.
So does that mean the incinerator would then be closed down because you can't reduce its effort? It is what it is, isn't it?
If we didn't create any waste, then that's the ideal scenario.
So
anyway, so the gentleman at the back.
Hi, so you keep referring to zero waste as a hypothetical, and of course it's a hypothetical because with this incinerator you're incentivising the producing as much waste as possible because under the contract you'd be fined if you weren't able to meet the required volumes. So how can we affect a zero waste strategy if we're incentivising the production of waste?
Yeah, just Annie, can you just clarify that we're not fining?
No, there's no fine in the contract in that way.
So what happens if there's not the required volume of waste met?
Currently.
Close it down. So if nobody produced any waste,
yes, but
that
if
would
we
be
produce
nobody.
less,
But
if we
bring it
produce
from
less
elsewhere.
waste,
if there was no waste to be taken to the incinerator, then
Say
obviously
there was
that's-
half of the amount that it works on now. So would we get, it doesn't work unless it's at full capacity. So where would the difference between the half amount and full capacity be met? How would you meet that?
So
I'll just try a contract. So I'm not saying I have all the technical answers, but I think what you're saying is, if we get to a scenario where there's not enough waste in the partnership for the incinerator to run,
Yeah.
but there is still the same amount of waste or enough waste elsewhere, you're asking, would that waste be driven in to be used in the incinerator?
Yes.
Now I think, again, I'll ask this to the officers. My understanding is that the situation you're describing, while we might say it's, I guess, hopeful in one regard, isn't something which is seen as likely, because you're likely to see the waste reduce relatively uniformly because it's so heavily based on national policy. You haven't got individual councils who are going to have like driving down waste level way, way, way below other areas, because we're in one country where the vast majority of waste and legislation around this is by national government. So when you ask a question which is incredibly hypothetical, the answer, the reason there isn't a clear answer is because obviously a huge amount of work hasn't been done on a situation which is very hard to see how it will ever happen. So I don't want you to take like an assumption from that there's something anyone's hiding. I don't think anyone in this room has a very clear, to be honest, a very clear answer to that question, which is why I've got your name, so why the lady was saying, oh, I could need to discuss that hypothetical, because you're not going to spend ages and ages in the contract writing out something which is not a clear reason to see why it would happen. I hope you see what I'm trying to say. I don't know if you can clarify.
But would the incinerator operate then if there was only half the amount of waste?
So technically, the facility doesn't have to be at maximum capacity in order to operate. So there's two lines, so it could operate on, for example, 50%. But as you say, this is a theoretical exercise, and we can significantly reduce our waste without any impact on the
That's what we needed to know.
But we're looking at zero carbon for 2030, which isn't actually that far away. So my concern, and I think a lot of people's concern, is that we should be planning for that, and as well as the waste needing to be reduced, we also have the air pollution and the greenhouse gas emissions.
It has to close by 2030 under a zero carbon future. What plans are you making to close it in 10 years?
Well,
it's a climate emergency and emitting like 300,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. That's incompatible. So that's 3 million tonnes over the next 10 years. Beyond that, it needs to stop. So what you should be talking about today, this is the most important issue in the room, is how do we get out of this contract? What are we going to do with our waste in 10 years? And you need to start now, because you've taken a long, long time with declaring the climate emergency, with apologies to the other council. I'm just talking about Sutton, because they've got a mix-up on the date, they've not made any provision, they've not made any publicity about it. So, but all the other councils have declared a climate emergency, so you can't keep burning this stuff, right? Because we've got 300,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. So that's 3 million tonnes for the next 10 years. What are you going to do in 2030? Because it needs to shut. So start thinking about how you're going to shut it.
Right, well obviously one of the ways we are doing this, we measure all the amounts of waste that's being taken to the incinerator, we know how much is being taken to recycling, and of course that's exactly what the officers will do as we get more successful with our policies in reducing waste. Their job is to then talk to and talk around the contract. We all talk around the table about how we're going to make those changes. But
well, we need to reduce by 10% a year, right? For 10 years to nothing.
Right. The point we're trying to make is we haven't got a crystal ball. So, and we're only one South London Waste Authority. We're not.
Well, we do have a crystal ball because climate science shows we're all going to die.
We do accept,
yeah.
All four boroughs accept that we want to work with people around climate change. So again, we've got plenty of scope to discuss these ideas, and let's get discussed. We're doing a commission in Croydon. We're doing a commission, so you're very welcome to attend that. And then we'll move on to the next report.
I think this discussion just highlights the need to have more discussions with officers. To look at the evidence, the facts, with the public, and invite them to whatever a workshop or a pre-meet so that they can sit down and look at the evidence, ask those questions, and get the reassurances.
Yeah, and that's a very positive suggestion. So can we agree that particular report, and then we'll move on to the next report from John?
Could I ask one more question, which was actually just relating to that report and the schools?
Well, I hadn't actually asked for agreement on the report, so I'll allow one more question regarding the education part.
Because I work with schools, and I'm still sort of talking to children about looking after their rubbish and making sure that they recycle. And I know there is lots of information, and I think children are, very receptive to ideas about recycling. And I guess there's just an area where I'm still unsure of. Is in terms of like contamination of waste. So there's lots of information about all the different things and what can be recycled, and there is a lot that is being recycled within our boroughs. But in terms of contamination, and I think there's also been sort of things in the news, or maybe it's from different councils and how they operate, where maybe small bits like bottle tops, if they're still attached, if there are different types of plastics mixed up. I think that gives people, it makes people quite unsure about what they're doing, and in terms of it sort of them doing the right thing. And I think that would be quite good if there could be some more information about that. And also I wanted to ask about schools, particularly you were talking about food waste, and schools obviously are probably quite a big area where there is a lot of food waste. And I don't actually know what happens to the school waste, or for that matter, restaurants and things, all the places where we would imagine there to be a huge bulk of food waste, how that's actually managed within the boroughs.
Okay, thanks for that. John, do you want to answer that? And then I'll take a vote on this report, and then we'll move on to your next report.
So, I think you hit a really important point on the contamination, because we have to find a balance between providing the level of information that people that are very invested, like yourselves, are to get recycling right, but not so much as to put off the people that aren't so invested, because for them it needs to feel easy and simple. If you make it look complicated, they're going to turn off. So it's really, really hard to get that levels right. We're currently looking at developing most of our comms that goes out, the mass comms that goes out around how to use the service is quite basic. It's quite image based because of language issues and trying to make it accessible. But you're right, and it's interesting on the presentation I'm about to give, there is evidence that as people are making more of an effort to recycle and become more invested in recycling, they're also demanding more information. There's a thirst out there for more. Those questions are coming up more often because they're recycling more. They're going, oh, well, how about this? And how about this plastic bit pen? And how about this bicycle tyre? So, we need to find a way to make that information accessible and available to the people who want it, but not present it in a way that puts off people that we're still trying to focus in, if you see what I mean. In terms of the school thing, I'm probably not the right person. That would be commercial sort of contracts, I imagine, that each school would have. But I'm sure it's something that most schools would find that they're under pressure to deliver. But yeah, that would be a commercial, that wouldn't be a contract that was managed by our Phase C contract. That would be separate arrangements that each school has with their own commercial waste provider. So I wouldn't be able to say what each individual school does with their food waste.
Okay, right.
Can I just make a comment? It's not a question. I just think that would you have the clout to be able to pass a policy to say that all packaging should have where it has to be recycled? You know, like cigarette packets used to have the warning about smoking and what it does to you. Can packaging actually say this needs to be recycled here? I can't find out where to recycle cotton wool. I have had. Yes, it can. No, it can't. What if it goes in this one, it goes in that one, you can't recycle it? I still can't find out. So, the packaging came with labelling so that people could actually know where it has to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in us as a South London Waste Partnership putting forward ideas like that and lobbying central government and through the Mayor's office as well in London.
I'm sure you'd have more clout than I would.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good idea and we can take that up. Just for example, earlier on we discussed in the workshop about getting the government to do a national campaign, anti-fly tipping campaign. So the South London Waste Partnership and the 4 boroughs, we've all agreed, will be on board on that.
Well, you've done that, but now I also hear you're going to charge people to use their dumps, to use their recycling centres. There is more if they use it more than once a week or something.
Yeah, I'm talking about part of it is the awareness about why you shouldn't fly tip and so on. So it's an anti-fly tipping campaign. It's not about excuses that people want to make. It's about changing their behaviour. So we've all agreed that we put forward some positive ideas, like for instance, new for old collection schemes. So if someone delivers you a fridge,
Yeah.
part of it is that they'll take away your old fridge as part of the payment. So it's those sort of positive ideas. And that they then link up with something like a reuse centre with the old fridge, and see if that we can reuse the items on that and make use of them.
Well, there is a recycling centre down in Cornwall, and you can in Devon, and you can actually go and buy 2 screws and 1 piece of wood. It's amazing.
As a partnership and as individual councils, we can lobby the government. What we're trying to do as a partnership, working with contractors that have to pick up the fly tipping, is we're putting those ideas in a petition that we hope all of you will sign as well. If we get 100,000 signatures, we'll be insisting on 3 points that we want the government to do. And one of them is an anti-fly tipping campaign, you know, explaining it. A bit like the Drink and Drive campaign, where they made it a social stigma to drink and drive. It's that sort of campaign that we need to make it a social stigma to fly tip. So those are the sort of things we can do as a partnership and we can lobby for. So your idea there, I'll get our comms team, we'll make sure we do some lobbying in the bodies that we can. For those
And maybe to get packaging made of one recyclable material, rather than like, for instance, sandwich packets. You've got the clear cellophane plastic, you've got the paper bit.
All of us, I think, would like more legislation from the government to go to all across businesses, all across our country.
It helps everybody.
Reducing plastic packaging anyway. There are other alternatives. Right, okay, so moving on, so is that report agreed? Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, which you begin. And you've got the 10 part, that presentation.
Thank you, Jay. Agenda item 10 is a report on the findings of the 2019 resident survey, social research work. So there's a short covering report. The focus of attention should be on the presentation. If you will give me sort of 15 minutes of your time, I'd just like to run through and highlight some of what I think are the sort of most interesting observations from that. So just to run through a reminder of the methodology and how this was conducted. So it was an independent research company that did this work for us, DGS Research. Just over 1,000 telephone interviews that were conducted. Quotas were set to ensure the sample was representative, so these weren't just random 1,000 people, they were recruited according to certain quotas to make sure we spoke to a representative sample of people. The findings are subject to a standard error of plus or minus 3% and 95% confidence level. I always like to make that point, I know it's a bit techie, but it means that if we see a finding of 50%, we can be 95% confident that the actual, if you ask every single person in the entire South London Waste Partnership region, that the actual result would be between 47 and 53. So that's what plus or minus 3% and 95% confidence level means. There were an additional 350 booster surveys that were conducted within the locality of the Bennington site. That's something that we've always done, going right back to 2010. And that's obviously because a lot of our operations are based around that site, so we like to see whether the views of people who live in the vicinity, their views on waste management differ significantly from the views of people who live further afield. And just for your information, the plus or minus on that is 5.2%, a bit bigger obviously because we've got a smaller sample. And the results are compared, where appropriate, with the findings from 2010, 13 and 16 surveys. This is the 4th time we've done this survey, and it means we're starting to build a really valuable and quite unusual sort of longitudinal study in terms of looking at people's attitudes and opinions around waste. So, kicking off, one of the first things we asked them was around looking at the commitment to recycling, and we asked which of these statements best describe the attitude to recycling. And at the top of the pile we had recycle as much as you can, even if it requires additional effort. And at the bottom we had do not recycle. And you can see from here the sort of really positive news, and particularly over the last 10 years, is a really significant increase in the proportion of people that say they recycle, even if it requires additional effort. And we're now at a point where 3/4 of the people in the partnership region state that. A further 22% say that they recycle if it requires a little additional effort. So the vast majority are willing to put a certain amount of effort in, but 75% are willing to make quite a fair bit of additional effort now. It might not be surprising. I mean, I think we feel like we've moved into that place, but I think it is just worth reminding ourselves how far we've come in a relatively short space of time. Going back 10 years, that figure was only 58%, so that's quite a significant shift. So then if we split that up by age, and this comes back to the point, Councillor, that you made earlier around younger residents and the concern around that. So you're absolutely right. If you look at that top line, recycle as much as you can, even if it requires additional effort, and then we've split those results up by age group, you can see that basically older people have a better commitment to recycle. 16 to 34-year-olds are not brilliant at being committed to recycling. And we found that last time, actually, and it was really concerning. And we've been doing a lot of work over the last 3 years to try and change that, and a lot of our campaign efforts have been focused at that slightly younger demographic. It's not all bad news, although 61% is a lot lower than the other age groups. It's much better than the 54% we had 3 years ago. So we've moved from 54 up to 61%, and that's, I think, a result of the efforts we've been making to really engage with that younger age group. So there is some positive news there, they're heading in the right direction, but there's still a bit of work to do, clearly, but the messages are getting through. So, obviously the 4 boroughs, or certainly 3 of the boroughs, Kingston a bit less so, but have introduced very significant service changes in the last few years to their collection services, and we've seen the results of those in terms of tonnages and the increase in recycling and the reduction in waste, but we're also interested in seeing whether residents feel that difference and whether they actually perceive it, in their homes, that they can feel they're recycling more and wasting less. And you can see from this this chart that the answer, there we go. The answer is a clear yes. So we can see, first of all, on the right-hand side, there's a big increase in the number of people who say they feel they are recycling more. It's gone up from 31% in 2016 to 51% in 2019. And the question was, do you feel you're recycling more than you were this time last year? So, so that's very positive. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that the similar question, but around, do you feel like you're producing less waste? Which is obviously even more important than recycling. And the good news there again is that 30% of people do feel that they're also producing less waste. So again, it's not a surprise. We're seeing that sort of reflected in the tonnages that we're now collecting, but it's good to see that that's filtering through and that residents are feeling that, because it means that they feel connected to what we're doing. So we asked a whole range of questions around attitudes to recycling, and I just wanted to highlight 3 of them. It's a bit of a mixed bag here, to be honest. The first one was, I feel my own recycling efforts make a difference. Now, oh, there we go, sorry about that. So, slightly concerning. I don't want to overrate this one because it's still, it's still good that 38% of people strongly agree with that sentiment, that their recycling efforts make a difference. But it's slightly concerning. We've seen, from 2013 it was 43%, it dropped to 42 in 2016, and we've now dropped a little bit more to 38%. So we just need to keep an eye on that, because I think it's interesting. People are doing the right thing, they're recycling more, they're more committed to recycling, and yet it seems like they're perhaps a little bit more concerned that their personal efforts don't make a difference. It might be that it feels like their efforts are a drop in the ocean, just that the challenge feels so huge, and what difference can I make? It might be just that they're more aware of the challenge and the scale of it. But I think there's a lot of work to do, because we mustn't allow people to make them to feel like their efforts aren't worthwhile, because then they will lose that commitment. So we need to really focus on that. Slightly more encouraging is that the statement, I don't believe the council actually does recycle the items collected for recycling. Now, back in 2010, 31% of people strongly agreed with that, so there was real cynicism and concern about where recycling ended up. We've done an awful lot of work to reassure people and provide information. The destination recycling video is the latest element of that, and you can see that there's been really steady progress over the years. So in 2013 it was 27%, reduced to 19% in the last survey, and now this survey it's just 15%. We say that they have they strongly agree with that statement, that they have concerns. So that's really good news. I think that's very positive. And then this is a very interesting point, and it picks up the point that the lady in the audience made a minute ago, actually, which is that the demand for information is increasing. So you can see again it's gone from 16% to 27% to 33% who agree that they need more information on what can and can't be recycled. And I suppose if you think about it, I don't think it's necessarily a criticism of our communications, I would say that, but that's how I'm going to spin it. But I would say actually our comms has been pretty comprehensive, but I think as more people engage in the recycling process, you're bound to have more demand for information. And you get more specific questions about things like lids and bits of products that have various elements to it. Do I have to split them up? How do I manage that? Cotton wool, that sort of thing. So we need to think really carefully about how we provide the right level of information to the right people. This is an interesting one. So back in 2016, we started for the first time asking people to tell us what they thought their borough's recycling rate was. It was very interesting because back then, the average across the Partnership region response was 50%. People thought we were recycling 50%. And at the time, we were actually recycling nearer 40%. So there's quite a big difference of 10 percentage points. And the concern with that was if residents thought we were doing better than we actually were, maybe they wouldn't be as committed and as motivated to change their behaviours. Oh, we're doing all right, we're doing 50%. So we've done a lot of work, particularly through the service change, to highlight to residents what the current recycling rates were. And there's some evidence that that's had some good effect, because residents now, the average, they are saying is 45%. So they've brought their estimates down a bit to be a bit more in line. And actually, our real recycling rates have gone up to more like 47, 48%. So you've now got a sort of a 2 to 3% percentage point difference compared to a 10. So we've aligned those views, which is a really key objective of the comms strategy. So I was pleased to see that. And the result of that is that it means that people's ambitions for the future are more realistic in terms of what can be achieved. So people would like their desired borough recycling rate in 5 years to be 76%, but they think that achievable is 66%. So I think that's a good target to work with them on. If we can get to that, I think we'd be fairly satisfied with that as a recycling rate in 5 years' time. So. Moving on to the HRRCs, just very quickly. So satisfaction with the HRRCs remains pretty high. You can see the net satisfied, so if you combine very and fairly satisfied, is at 80%. Slight drop from 86% last time, but it's still pretty high. Generally speaking, people like their HRRCs and they can see the role that it plays. And it's interesting, I think it's worth pointing out, because obviously people only use their local site, there's no significant variation in satisfaction across the Partnership region, so pretty much sort of stable satisfaction across sites. What's also interesting, although satisfaction overall has dipped very slightly, you can see that actually 54% of people think that services have improved. So that's an interesting one. It might be that there are different factors driving satisfaction, or it could just be that expectations have risen faster than. So people say yes, it's improved, but my expectations have outgrown that. So, but that's I just wanted to highlight that because it's slightly unusual. In terms of landfill, and moving on to views around how we manage our non-recyclable waste, you can see that 96% of residents think it's important that we send less waste to landfill, and that's consistent with 2016 findings, so that's remained the same. But encouragingly, the number who say it's very important has increased by 7 percentage points, from 81 to 88%. So we now have 88% of people who think it's very important that we send less of our waste to landfill. So that message has definitely got through. People understand it. They understand that landfill is at the very bottom of the waste hierarchy for good reason, and that they support us trying to find alternatives for that waste. In terms of asking them about energy recovery, and again, these are the questions that we've been asking people for sort of 10 years now, so we can look back at how those views have changed. It's interesting when you start exploring the alternatives to landfill with residents. If you just ask them open-ended question and ask the question, what do you think we should be doing with that, without prompting them or giving them any sort of prompts, you can see that a third, 33%, mention incineration, energy recovery. They might call it different things, but we've grouped those responses into one category. So, yeah, and a similar number say that they don't know. So there's still quite a lot of confusion out there, and you can see Interestingly, other was very high last time, 64%, because I think we've got so many different, quite varied and interesting suggestions. But I think a lot of people are now, you can see 11% for the first time, and people saying, reuse, recycle, so that message is really getting through as a real alternative to, taking on the zero waste sort of method theme there. So, but a third mention of ERF in some form without being prompted. And what's interesting then is if we start talking about the Merton ERF facility in particular, and ask people if they're aware of the facility being in existence, you can see the core survey, which is across the whole partnership region. Awareness across the entire region is at 32%, but there's quite a big variation, as you'd expect, between Kingston and Sutton, for example. In Kingston was 16%, Sutton was over 50%, 51%. So you would expect that variation based on the locality of where people are. And the booster survey, I'll just highlight this because obviously, so this is people that live in the 6 wards closest surrounding the site. Awareness of the facility in those booster wards is at 43%, so higher than you would, as you would expect, than on the region as a whole. And then tying into the earlier point where I talked about the question being unprompted, if you then start to explore and prompt and give examples to residents, so for example the question was, taking all alternatives into account, energy recovery facilities are a good way to dispose of our non-recyclable waste. You can see that 2/3 of residents, 66%, agree with that statement. And interestingly, it's actually slightly higher in those booster wards close to the facility. So, I think there's evidence people understand that we need to move waste away from landfill. I think they recognise, I think the majority recognise that ERF is a good short-term solution, but I also think there's an understanding that there's a bigger challenge, coming down the line, that we need to find alternatives to this as well. So, and then also just moving on, so for the first time in our resident survey, we asked for feedback on satisfaction with our waste collection services and the street cleaning, because this is the first time we've done the survey when all of those services have fallen under the shared contract. I appreciate, strictly speaking, it's not in the remit of this committee, but I thought, given I have the right people in the room, you might be interested in the findings, and I wanted to cover that for you. So you can see net satisfaction with the recycling waste collection service stands at 64% at the moment. I'm sure we would all like that to be a bit higher, but actually in my experience, if you consider the scale of the changes that have been implemented across 3 of the 4 boroughs in the last few years, 64% actually isn't as bad as it might feel. I think I would very much expect that satisfaction to improve over the next few years as those services settle in and bed in. There's a really clear correlation between when the changes took place, or the boroughs that had changes most recently, and satisfaction. So satisfaction is highest in Kingston, because you've not had any significant changes for some time, followed by Sutton, followed by Croydon, followed by Merton. So it's an absolute perfect correlation with who's had the changes most recently, and it's as residents get used to those changes and they settle in. So I would expect in 3 years' time, when we ask that question again, to get a much better results. Garden waste, just very quickly, so 30% of the respondents to this survey also subscribe to their garden waste service, and there are some reasons, the most common reasons for not subscribing were don't produce enough garden waste, too expensive, no garden, which is a good reason, and it's easier to take it to the HRRC. But satisfaction rates with the garden waste service are actually pretty good at 77%. But it's good to have a benchmark of that so we can keep an eye on it and monitor it over time. And then finally, satisfaction with street cleanliness. You can see that this is probably where there's the most work to be done, pretty low to be honest with you. So residential streets, 54% satisfaction, town centres 46%. Again, I think that's the new contracts bedding in, the new arrangements settling down, and we very much expect to see those satisfaction rates improve, and we will be setting some targets with the overall common strategy to help support that, and those measurable targets that we want to commit to over the next 3 years, because we would like to see those satisfaction rates get to over the next few years. And you can see there that more people think that the streets have got worse than better, so 32% said it got worse, 18% got better. Still, the majority, 49%, feel it stayed about the same, so it's not a disaster, but there's clearly some work to do there. So just to conclude and sum up, Key challenges: satisfaction with street cleanliness and recycling waste collections, increased demand for recycling information and how we deliver that, making sure that we don't put people off, but we provide information, the detailed information that some people require and are seeking. And this concern that residents maybe feel like their efforts aren't worthwhile and don't make a difference, the scale of the challenge and trying to break it down and make each individual household or individual business or resident understand the role that they can play in this and that they do have an important role to play. So there's a real challenge for us there as communicators to get that message across. Reasons to be encouraged. We can see a real increased commitment to recycle, which is fantastic. Younger residents are making more effort to recycle than they were, although there's clearly still some work to do there. Trust in the councils is improving. This more accurate view of current rates and recycling and realistic targets for the future. And this strong support, for us finding alternatives to landfill, using ERF as an alternative for now for landfilling, and moving forward with that. So that sort of, I would say, sums up the key points there. So the results of this survey will now feed into the 3-year communication strategy for the partnership, which I will bring to the next committee, if that's okay, because I think it's really important that our comms strategy is informed and driven by data and evidence and insight. So, hopefully that was helpful and people found that interesting.
Yeah, that was really good, John. So it's an important piece of work talking to people right across the South London Waste Partnership. So I think is that something we're going to do on a regular, what sort of frequency do we do?
3 years.
It's 3 years, okay, thanks for that. I'll take 2 public questions, one from the, I'll do 3 because Peter's been very patient at the back there. So, the lady with the orange jacket.
So I just thought, if you've got a comms strategy coming out for the next 3 years, surely that should be aligned with our zero carbon plans for 2030, and that maybe we shouldn't be talking, I think it was a bit misleading there to say that that's the best choice, the ERF, because you haven't necessarily asked people about the alternative if we are actually going to put zero waste as the ultimate goal, because I think there is a huge awareness that has been raised by the public, David Attenborough and all the documentaries, and now the amount of awareness that's on the news. People are so frustrated at being faced with all the waste around them, and they want for it not to be there anymore. So all the time with this kind of information and talking about comm strategy, I think we need to think bigger and better and more ambitious and start talking to people about the zero waste strategy rather than just ERF is the best we can do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we need more people on board with that view than we've got at the moment through that survey. Peter?
Just further on that point, it was the point that I've never seen anything from the council pointing out the negatives of the incinerator, so saying that people don't think it's a bad idea, that's unsurprising because the council haven't told them why it's a bad idea. But my second point is, this question is of residents. Is there an equivalent one of businesses? Because one of the elephant in the room that keeps being missed out, majority of the waste, or a huge amount of the waste, is produced by local businesses, and yet there doesn't seem to be anything in here about how incentivising them to recycle food waste, other waste, and to reduce their waste levels and their attitudes, but they seem to be missed out of this completely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What sort of role has the South London Waste Partnership got in terms of talking to the contractors about their commercial waste? Because obviously the councils themselves have got no responsibility to take away traders' waste, but obviously they do so sometimes using the same contractor as ourselves. So that's a really good question. I'll take one more question there, and then if John answers to the 3 questions, and then I'll do the councillors and get the report by agreed, hopefully. So the gentleman there, and then we'll go to councillors' questions.
Some of the points raised in the data about people's awareness of the incinerator. Those in Kingston, it said 16% of people were aware that there is one. Close to the incinerator, there were 6 wards where awareness is 42%. And then at the same time, the report declared that most people think that incineration is a great idea. So we're simultaneously saying that in Kingston, 84% of people don't know this is an incinerator, yet at the same time they think it's a good idea, even though they don't know about it. Yeah, I mean, I think this also shows the lack of consultation and the way that when the thing was commissioned and built and developed, there was no consultation really. You did your best to hide it, and that shows the success of that, because most people in the area don't know its existence. So I don't see how you can then say people don't know about it, they don't know how their rubbish has been disposed of, but they say it's the best opportunity, but you're not communicating to them the amount of CO2 it's putting into the atmosphere, and you're not communicating to them how it's having negative health impacts from PM10, PM2.5, NO2, repeated breaches of very generous environmental agency levels, which are above WHO levels. So that report is kind of disingenuous and just greenwash.
Right, okay, do you want to answer the questions just regarding the
business one first?
The business part.
Just in terms of trade waste, we do offer commercial waste services through our contracts, and the businesses can pick those up, but they can also use a range of other providers. I think it's a really good point about engaging with businesses, and it's something we should look at in our communications work.
We'll definitely do that. John?
Yeah, so picking up the point you've just raised about the report, I don't think we're not trying to combine those two things together. We're not saying just a blanket statement that the majority of people support the ERF. It's not quite as simple as that. I think what the report does show, like I say, is if you ask, not connecting it directly to a local facility, if you ask the general question, what would you do, or what do you think is the best thing available to us to do with all of our non-recyclable waste that we currently produce, in the context of the fact that most people agree that we should be trying to minimise that as much as possible, but they recognise that it exists and that we have to find something to do with it. A third spontaneously mention incineration or energy recovery of some sort. And then when you talk specifically about the Beddington facility, or no, when you specifically offer that as an option, that increases to 66%, to two-thirds, then agree with ERF in principle. You're right, you know, there's evidence that nearer the site, so in Sutton, for example, the majority of people are aware of the ERF, but in Kingston that awareness is much lower. So yes, in Kingston there are people that have expressed a general view that supports the ERF, but they may not have been, when they asked that question, aware of the Beddington site. They were, of course, within a few seconds, because about 2 questions further on they were asked where you were aware that Beddington ERF has been built. So, yeah, I don't think the report's trying to merge those two things together in any way, and if that's how it was presented there, then that wasn't the intention.
But it should do, because if you want behaviour change, then people need to know that this stuff's been burnt locally, that the more they consume has impacts on the wider environment and the local environment, and then that might encourage behaviour change. To sort of look at them all disparately and go, oh, we're just doing that over there and people over here don't know, yet the people that know least are contributing a quarter of it. It might be slightly different, but just let's say a quarter. I think this needs to be linked together. You need to be looking at how you're going to bring this down. I know you don't want to, because there's a kickback for the councils from the money from Viridor, but we need to get that rubbish stopping going to the incinerator and stop burning it.
It's cheaper for the councils to recycle than it is to send stuff to the ERF, so there's no financial incentive for the boroughs to send waste to the ERF that could have been recycled.
Okay, but for Viridor it's a lot more profitable to burn.
But also, just to come back on your point, I think we are providing lots of information. There's a virtual visitor centre, which I think is really good. It's available to Kingston residents. There's the twice monthly emissions reports. You said that we're not being honest about the emissions that the facility produces, but it's there for people to download and look for themselves.
No, I didn't say it was dishonest. I said if they breached them,
so that information
and
is
they
late.
Yeah.
So,
just to conclude on that, and obviously it's very important that we, and being on the South London Waste Partnership, all of us around the table, since we had the discussion about incinerator, agreed that we have to put all that information to be publicly accountable, and to be quite frank, not everybody on the South London Waste Partnership, since I've been on anyway, is in total agreement about ERFs anyway. So, I spent quite a lot of time campaign against it, and actually spoke against it at some planning meeting. But the actual reality, although we're in a partnership to try and unify services, and we've had success like increasing the recycling rate, not everybody agreed on that. And you know, I hoped that in this modern day and age there would be the technology around that you didn't have to put particles in the air, or we could do different things. But we are where we are. So as a partnership, I don't think anyone around this table is selling the ERF as the total answer, but it is actually factually better than actually putting stuff in the name for at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an invidious position.
And I am not a supporter of ERFs, but the reality is that's what we've got. So I think we're very lucky on the partnership. We have got a set of really good officers that they haven't got any political or any dealings with Viridor. They're just officers that work for the councils, and they will do their best for the partnership. And John does a really good job in publicising, making sure everything about the ERF is put out there.
I understand that, but we need to move to closing it down.
Because it's a very difficult one for me, honestly, because I mean, Peter at the back knows that you know, I did actually campaign against the incinerator, but you know, we are where we are, so we've got to try and work positively. So that's why I think the partnership is doing a good job, and there's no way that I mean, our key objective, I think, as a partnership is to reduce waste and to then reuse and then to recycle. So there's absolutely no way anyone around this table wants to feed that incinerator more than we have to.
No, but saying we are where we are is just accepting its existence and its dominance. What we need to be thinking about, what you need to be thinking about, is how we move in 10 years to closing this down.
And that is exactly what we said.
We don't have much time, and councils move slowly, so we need to think about it now.
As we look at technologies coming on board, that's why I said the most important thing that Andy supported as well as a partnership is we will look to be flexible with contracts and so on, and we will look to make changes. And obviously if something comes online that's better, or there is a way and things reduce, then we can, there are arguments and debates and discussions. This partnership.
They do already exist, Stuart.
Manuel, and then we'll take all the public questions now. So I'm going to do Manuel
on the presentation.
We've had a lot of questions. So.
I think it's from a certain point of view, it's quite reassuring that on the waste and strengthening it, the data matches what we've seen in our boroughs with our resident surveys. And even if it's not, I'm not satisfied with 64% in terms of satisfaction with the waste. In our survey, we've seen an increase from year to year since the satisfaction, which is, I think, where we want to be and keep improving. I wonder if we've ever asked or made the difference between satisfaction rates on waste in floods and in households. Because I wonder if there would be a difference there. I know that in Sutton, I'm sure in Croydon and other boroughs, the same issue. Contamination rates in floods are much worse than households. And I think a lot of residents that want to do the right thing, that live in floods, produce communal bins, maybe get a bit disenchanted with some of their neighbours that don't recycle, and then obviously contamination increases, and then there's not that incentive to keep doing the right thing. So I wonder if we have a difference in it, or we have the split in terms of satisfaction rates.
It's not one of the quotas in the resident survey. There's a limit to how many quotas you keep adding, because it gets more and more difficult to find the people that match. So it's not one of the quotas in there, but it's a real focal point for the partnership at the moment. We're running a trial in Sutton, looking at 3 estates and looking at rolling out a whole range of interventions to try and reduce contamination and increase recycling rates, because we're right, it's a massive challenge, particularly with communal collections. So we're looking to roll those out in the next few months. We'll then evaluate it, feedback to the partnership, and if it's been successful, we can look at rolling out wider than that. Resource London have just published a really good report looking at this. They did a study on, I think it was about 16 Peabody estates in central London, where they rolled out loads of different interventions and tested them, and spent a lot of time and effort measuring waste composition analysis, working out what worked, what didn't. So we're learning from that, implementing it in Sutton, see if it works, and if it does, try and roll it out wider. Because you're right, there's a massive potential there to increase our capture rate if we can reduce the contamination from communal collections.
Okay, Okay, can we agree that report? Okay, thanks very much.
Sorry,
And
can I
just
ask a
moving on
question, please, about this communications and about the research? The research was done by DJS Research Company, and it's clearly been paid for, so with a goal and a purpose. Now, I work in research at a university, and I understand how this works, and I'm rather concerned that actually some of the questions that were asked were quite leading, and I wonder whether the way in which you have not put you've not used this as an opportunity to put information to the public. Like, did you know that this incinerator actually pumps out certain wastes? Did you know that landfill does other things? Did you know that? If you put that in the questions and then you ask other questions, it's possible to see how you can change people's attitudes. But I'm not sure that there's a real drive to change people's attitudes, because there's some, you know, we have got 10 years. The environment and the world that your children, who may be 3, when they're 13, they won't have the world that you and I've got. We have to act. So how we ask the questions, how we communicate. It's not about keeping the status quo, it's actually about facilitating a process at every opportunity to encourage our public to think.
Yeah, I think everyone around the table agrees with you. So they're all wanting to get to the same objective. So, John, that's quite a good point. In terms of the methodology, if you just touch on that, but there are plenty more opportunities as we go along to talk about some of the issues that we've discussed tonight and get the right comms messages out there.
So DJS Research are a very well respected and recognised independent research company. They follow all the relevant best practice guidelines, they're members of all the relevant associations. So they had control over how the questions were asked and the way it was presented. I think it's important to note that the objective of this, it's not a communication exercise, it's a research project, so I would argue that by making the points you've made, that would make them leading, because you're trying to convince people to answer in a certain way, whereas what I think we've done is just ask the question outright without providing them. You know, what we want to know is their current view. We don't want to try and convince them, we want to know what people currently think, and then we can use that to inform our communications activities, which is trying to convince them to change their views, and then we measure it again in 3 years' time. So that's what this report is about, and I stand by it as a robust piece of work. I'm sure, I know that DJS Research would. I'll be happy to provide background information on DJS if anyone had any concerns. You're right, it is paid for, but that's how these things work. If someone else wants to pay for it, I'm sure we'd be very happy to accept the offer. But yeah, I mean, DJS take it very seriously. They work independently of us, and they present the findings that they found, and these findings are what they've you know, having spoken to residents in that way, found. So.
Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah. Any questions from the panel? Can we agree that report?
Chair, sorry, just one of the recommendations, or its next steps actually, in that is that this is about informing the 2020 to 2023 comms strategy. When would that come before us? Because I'm particularly, I don't want to open a point of conversation about it now, but I'm particularly interested when it does come to us to see how you seek to address the differential between young people and older cohorts in terms of their willingness to put themselves out, as it were, to recycle more.
So the plan is to bring that draft strategy back to the next committee meeting, and that will do 2 things. It will use the evidence we've gained from this research to evaluate the success of the current strategy. So we set some very clear, measurable, smart objectives in the last strategy, and this research findings will tell us how well we've done against those, and it will set similarly smart objectives for the next 3 years as well, and clearly picking up that point around how we engage with younger residents. Like I say, we have made really good progress. It's gone up from 58 to 64 off the top of my head. So we've made some good progress there, but there's clearly further work to do. It is strange, it's not unique to us. This is a result that we see across the country, that younger people are less engaged with recycling, which feels odd. It seems like an odd thing to say, but yeah, that's and the other bit of research that you see sometimes, I can't remember where it was, but there's some evidence to say that if you speak to people in that age group in more detail, do some qualitative research with them, they know that they're not doing recycling, they know that they should be doing it, but it's kind of something that they feel they're not quite grown up enough to worry about yet. And they say, and then you say, when will you start making the effort? And they say, oh, maybe next year or the year after. But then you go back and ask that age group, and it seems like they're just putting it off. So what we need to do is be really clear that they've got such an important role to play, because we've got to get them on board, we've got to get them...
There are those in that age group that have given up all hope already, you know, and they just think to hell with it. We're living our lives now, because my daughter falls into that age range. And I asked her, that's what she thinks.
That ties in with that other challenge around making people feel like they can make a difference and their efforts are worthwhile.
And you know, this is where Extinction Rebellion comes in as well, is how now the boroughs have claimed, you know, of going forward with the climate emergency motions through, is that, and in Croydon we're going to be trying to do this, we're going to be working bottom up with ideas and so on. I don't think there should be any problem for this committee and the South London Waste Partnership to meet with people, to talk about ideas and get younger people involved, but also use our comms money that we've got and skills we've got to try and get some of those ideas into fruition. But also, it also gives an opportunity for us to on the technical side, to explain some of the technical problems that we have in trying to achieve the things that we all want to achieve. But I think it's a good opportunity for young people to get involved, and that's what we should use the comms. Eric, I just want to bring you in because we're going to be meeting you soon. So just come in.
Yeah, we'd be very happy to meet you. No, it was more on that thing about the younger generation, and I wondered if you looked at the link with perhaps their living situation, because those of us who live in sort of more secure housing, particularly older people, you know, it's very clear, like they've been living there for a long time, they know what the situation is, they have space for the bins, they don't have to worry about their neighbours contaminating them, whereas younger people more often are living in more difficult situations, often communal situations. For example, where I live, I do recycle and I reduce my waste as much as I can, but almost always the bins are contaminated by those who I share the flat with, so I wonder if there's a link there.
I think the spotlight, I think that age group, the physical environment that they live in is part of the challenge, definitely. So finding solutions to that, and some of this this research project that I mentioned earlier that was West London have done, looked at things like in-home storage solutions, so trying to take really practical issues. They infiltrated loads of people's homes and put up cameras and looked at, you know, secretly filmed how they were not secretly, they knew the cameras were there, but they knew the cameras were there, but they didn't realise that it was a study looking at waste. They thought it was a study just looking at generally how people live their lives. And it showed the challenges you've just explained in communal properties, flats above shops, where there's not the space to have all these different bins that you need. So they came up with some really good solutions around in-home storage solutions, that sort of thing. So these are the sorts of things we're looking to explore in Sutton in our trial, and then perhaps hopefully roll out wider as well. But I think you're absolutely right. It's not that they don't want to recycle, it's just that there are more barriers in the way to doing it.
Okay, so can we agree that report? Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 11, so Annie for the last report of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is the risk report, and this report summarises key risk areas which are facing the partnership boroughs in relation to the waste disposal functions of the Joint Waste Committee. So the report sets out the background and the key risk areas which I will run through. So in 2.2 we continue to monitor changes in the recycling materials market. This is obviously a risk that we reported several times now to the partnership committee. There's still a lot of uncertainty with respect to the value of materials and availability of markets, and we're therefore really keen to make sure the quality of our recyclables is maintained and improved wherever possible. So we're taking a number of actions to protect the quality of our recycling, which is set out in the bullet points in paragraph 2.2 of this report. And this will form a key part of our comms work in 2021. That strategy for the next committee. Risk 2.3 looks at the impacts of those changes in the markets on our contracts, and we continue to manage and monitor this, as again we have done for the time that the recycling markets have been in this state of flux. 2.4 is the DEFRA strategy consultation, which took place last year on a number of different areas. We responded to the consultation, and we continue to monitor the likely outcome of the consultation to manage any risks or opportunities that those proposals might present to the boroughs and to the partnership. paragraph 2.5 covers Brexit and the risks that we face in relation to the potential changes around the exit of the UK from the EU. This paper was prepared before the 31st of January, so we have not yet reached the date of Brexit, but we haven't seen and don't anticipate seeing any impacts during the transition period. We will continue to monitor any potential impacts from the 31st of December, which continue to be as outlined in paragraph 2.5. We'll carry on working with our partners and contractors to make sure that we monitor and mitigate any potential risks of that. The recommendation of this report is that the Joint Waste Committee note the content of the report.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Yeah, can I just ask one on 2.4 with DEFRA's strategy consultation? Are they giving any idea back to local authorities and groups like ourselves about moving towards these issues around packaging and deposit schemes? Because I noticed that they're talking about a tax on plastic packaging, but was there no discussion about limitations on plastic packaging?
My understanding is that those are all areas they're keen to explore and pursue, that the consultation was to look at what some of the challenges were and how any outcome of their strategy.
But no time scale.
So we're waiting for that.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, can we agree the report? Agreed. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, that's. Can I thank all the members of the public for attending this evening and obviously asking some really good questions as well. And can I thank all the officers and members of the committee for engaging. But this isn't the end of the process, and I think this is I think a good way of actually doing things in the South London Waste Partnership. So we will, as we said, try and invite some people to some workshops, and particularly for the Extinction Rebellion group, we'll do a special get-together with officers to talk about some of the initiatives that come up through any work you're doing separately with the councils. So we'll swap numbers and make sure we do that. But thanks very much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your welcome. Thank you.